Every 90 seconds, someone is reported missing. Many return to their families. For others, something has gone seriously wrong. The sudden disappearance of a mother leaves a family baffled.
It was difficult to hear because she would have never left.
Carol stormed out of the house, jumped into her car and drove off.
Search warrants reveal answers.
Police discover marks in blood.
What happens in the police investigation that follows?
The police officer opens it and puts her hand in and feels something.
What happens to the family at its heart?
And inside, I'm dying inside because I just want to know where my mum was at that point. Guilt and, oh, it was horrible, it was horrific.
When missing turns to murder.
When I was growing up from a little girl, my mum was really supportive, took me to my dance classes. When I was 2.5, 3 years old, I started tapping jazz.
Even from an early age, Lorraine had firm ambitions for her life.
My mum and dad sitting like Cheshire cats because there's me dancing away, and I wanted to bottle that feeling up forever. When I was growing up from a little girl, my mum was really supportive. A feeling of being round her and her smell and her voice and feeling secure.
She was always eager to entertain her friends and family during the first steps of her career, especially Dad Sean, Brother Ross, and her mum, Carol.
She seemed proud of me back then and what I was achieving as a little dancer, happy in her life. We got on really well when I was growing up. Growing up, the atmosphere in the house was typical hustle and bustle, my dad at work, my mum working. My mum was a childminder.
People spoke quite warmly of how much their kids enjoyed going to the nursery, and she seemed to be quite a well-known figure in the area.
Me and Ross growing up were actually very, very close. So we used to play Barbies and Ken and play in the garden together and do everything together, family holidays. He was always there, like the big brother. We bickered like you would any relationship.
Lorraine is accepted on a dance training course, so the family all moved to Dunfermline so she can attend. But at home, there are some bumps in the road.
My mum dealt with depression all her life, through things that happened in her childhood, etc.
But Carol's depression is not the only issue that starts to put a strain on the family unit.
Ross's employment history was never a good area. He was sacked from every line of work that he was in. My mum always favoured Ross, and if there was an argument she would side with him, but oh, he's a young boy, he's a teenager, let him live his life. But he wasn't living his life. But as he got older he changed in the sense of he was a womaniser. It was the way he spoke to women, the way he treated them. He wasn't a nice person. Arguments were happening in the house all the time because I'm getting sacked, because of girls, because of the messaging. He had no aspiration to go anywhere in life. What were you actually going to do? No, get up and go. So it was just an absolute mess in the house. It wasn't a nice place to be. When my dad left when I was 19 and moved out and they had to legally separate because they were never married.
Carol continues to live with son Ross in the family home. It's just the two of them.
Once I had moved out of the house, the relationship was pretty broken by that point anyway, so we were trying to make it work as best we could. And it was very difficult because any time I did organise to do something with Mum, Ross was always there. So it kind of drifted apart.
Lorraine focuses on the next chapter of her life. She meets Steve, and quickly they fall in love, marry, and by late 2014, they have their first baby together.
We are out shopping. It was Christmas Eve, just in town, with our new baby, kind of showing him off as you do, with the pram and stuff. And I looked at my phone and there was a missed call from Ross.
Lorraine has been somewhat distant from her mum and brother since leaving to start her new family. But she calls back.
He said, "Mum's missing." That was it. It wasn't "hello, how are you?" It was, "Mum's missing." "What's happened?" He was like, "She's missing. If you hear from her, let me know. I need to go. Bye." Boom. That was the conversation. My stomach's churning at this point.
Ross has told police that his mother had driven off in her car, leaving her phone behind.
She was reported missing by her son, Ross. There were a number of circumstances that caused concern around her disappearance.
Can I take a note of your surname, please?
It's Taggart, T-A-G-G-A-R-T.
First name?
Ross.
And what's your mum's name?
Carol.
C-A-R-O-L.
Yeah.
Taggart.
Yeah.
Right, so when she left the house, when did you last see her?
About 1 o'clock on Monday morning.
It was certainly totally out of character for her to go missing.
Lorraine tells her dad, then meets police at home, who treat Carol's disappearance as a missing person.
They were just asking lots of questions. Do you know where she could have been? Has she got any friends? At this point, no, my mum didn't have any friends, but we're trying to rattle through anybody. Would she have walked out the house? I was like, no. Would she have left her phone in her bag? No.
She was somebody who was a law-abiding individual who didn't have an enemy in the world.
My mum would have never walked out her house. So the missing part was very, very strange to me. It was difficult to hear because she would have never left.
Police spend all day searching the local area, including the family caravan, some miles away.
They had a quick look at the caravan and it was immaculate. You know, there was nothing out of place or nothing that would cause them concern. But bearing in mind, you know, the huge majority of missing people turn up safe and well. There's no real red flags at that point.
We're having these conversations and we were trying to rattle through where she might have gone, and I was saying, obviously, our mum and dad's passed away, she'll maybe be up at the cemetery. She doesn't go out on her own.
Police pull all their resources to locate Carol.
It's all done in, you know, maps, and the areas are shaded off when they've been complete. And it has to be done in that method to ensure you're searching the area properly. Areas of foliage, trees, woods or whatever where somebody might be found. It's very methodical.
Asking people to check their outbuildings or garden sheds, just a general missing persons inquiry.
Carol's son Ross helps police in their efforts.
Ross was outside trying to direct our search teams when we were searching the fields at the back. You know, like you see in the telly, searching through the undergrowth. And he just approached them and said, "I think you should try up here," pointing to another area. I appointed family liaison officers who their sole purpose in the investigation was to liaise with the family and get as much information from them, which would assist us, but equally importantly, make the family aware of what we were doing to try and find Carol. There was information from Ross that they'd had an argument in the early hours in the morning and she'd disappeared.
Had there been any argument or?
That's the thing. We had an argument. She's been a bit depressive.
In the call, Ross says that the reason that Carol has run off is that maybe her state of mind isn't what it should be, that she's depressed. In his words, she's a bit depressive, that she's told the doctor the previous week, "I don't want to be here anymore."
The police are told about Carol's history of depression and mental health issues.
My problem is, we had the doctor in last week, and she even told the doctor that she was feeling so, well, she didn't want to be here anymore, was the words she used.
We deal with missing persons, we classify them red, amber or green, or indeed low, medium or high risk. But there's certainly enough for us to raise it up, if you like, and move Carol to a sort of high risk missing person, which then allows us to do a lot more intrusive investigation around sort of cell site analysis of the phone, look at her finances, see if we can evidence her using her bank account.
Finally, they find Carol's abandoned car in town, late on Christmas Eve.
Carol's car was found locally in a street which was of no real significance to the inquiry at the time. We took possession of that car, but what was significant to me was that her handbag and her keys were in the boot of the car.
At this point, the police start to think that something is seriously wrong, and there's more to this than just a missing persons case.
Our daughter Lorraine reported that she couldn't get her on her phone, and her phone was always by her side. She was never without her phone. Which raises that level of concern to a point where we would consider there's a possibility, at the very least, that harm has come to this lady.
Whilst most people are waking to start their festivities, for Lorraine and her family, it's more alarming news.
It was about 7 o'clock. Police knock. They said, we found our car. And I says, was our bag in the car? And it was, but it was in the boot. And my mum would get in the car, and it was always a black leather, and it went over here, and she would take the bag off and she would put it down like on the passenger side. It was always there. So she could get her medication or anything she needed. I says, why was our bag in the boot? I'm like, I don't know. I says, our bag was never in the boot. Because I was so adamant on these things, it triggered something in the police, but it was very, very odd. It was just sad because I wanted to enjoy my little boy's first Christmas. And like all the family came round because obviously he's the first grandchild and stuff. And Stephen was trying to be happy, and inside I'm dying inside because I just want to know where my mum was at that point. Guilt and oh, it was horrible, it was horrific.
Lorraine is desperate for answers, and her mum. Attention shifts to her half-brother.
I knew something was wrong. Why is she missing? And I knew Ross had something to do with it because the stories didn't tie in with what he was saying to the police, what the police were saying to me.
Ross Taggart might have appeared to the public to be the concerned son with the Facebook posts that he was doing and sharing the appeals.
Highlighting the fact that his mum had gone missing, and it was almost like an appeal for witnesses for anybody who may know of her whereabouts.
Ross visits the police station to press them on any developments with their search.
But to his family, this behaviour seemed very strange. You know, if he was sending messages or whatever, he was replying with like one-word answers. So he was being very, very cagey, and this was something that certainly caught the attention of his family.
With heightened feelings amongst the family members, Keith Hardy can't jump to fast conclusions.
I direct the lines of inquiry, and it's imperative that you keep an open mind throughout that.
The police here wouldn't say there's more to this than meets the eye. There was none of that.
Police are making sure their investigation clarifies everyone's stories to find out exactly what has happened.
He told us that after a fairly aggressive argument between the two of them, his position was that Carol stormed out of the house, jumped into her car and drove off.
The investigation starts to build a picture of the timeline of events.
He left it a few days before he reported his mother missing, and once we started looking into it, we realised he was pretty much, his hand was forced, and he was forced to report her missing by a family friend.
A nursery employee turns up to the nursery that Carol runs at her house, and she notices that Carol's car's missing, which in itself is very unusual. So she asks Ross, you know, where's your mum? And he says, well, we've had an argument. I think she's gone to spend Christmas at the caravan park. So the employee goes away to the caravan park, looks for Carol, she's not there, and the next day she goes back and says to Ross, you know, I can't see her, she isn't there, and almost forces the phone onto Ross to make this 101 call to the police.
Right, so when she left the house, when did she last see her?
About 1 o'clock on Monday morning.
It's becoming increasingly clear that something isn't quite right. Detectives start to ask some tough questions.
The police said to me, Stephen, my dad, and anybody else I'd interviewed, could Ross hurt your mum? Then everybody said yes. And I says, yes, he's hurt me.
We learnt a lot from Lorraine about an assault when Ross assaulted Lorraine some time ago.
He was arguing with me. He was arguing about my dad leaving, and he hit me. I was like, what are you doing? And by this, he was shouting at me, and my mum obviously got up. And she came through, and she just stood and said, what are you arguing about? And he was like, her, and then just started hitting me. And my mum just stood. She stood and watched. She didn't stop him. She didn't say anything, and he kept doing it to my ribs and my back, and I was trying to protect myself in a ball, and I was shouting, Mum. All I could, Mum, and she didn't do anything. She didn't.
There was real suspicions about the relationship Carol and Ross had, but nothing concrete. We learnt a lot from Lorraine around how Carol was so almost besotted with Ross. Never ruled out the possibility of him causing her harm. But I think they were pretty much convinced that Ross knew a lot more about their mum's disappearance than he was telling us as an investigating team.
Police ramp up efforts to investigate Ross. A week after reporting Carol missing, his movements are tracked.
He got a train to Edinburgh, and he went into a pawnbroker's in Edinburgh and attempted to pawn Carol's jewellery. Which was unsuccessful because he needed proof of ownership before they would pay for quite an expensive ring. It was a circumstantial case we were trying to build here, and the circumstances of him pawning his mum's jewellery, you could infer from that he knew his mum wasn't coming back.
The investigation team also look into Ross's online activity.
What we did do through his social media is we found out he'd been on a website called Plenty of Fish, and he'd met a girl on that website round about Christmas time.
What detectives also discover is that the car Ross said his mother sped off in was found outside the house of the girl he met on that dating website.
We traced her, interviewed her, and she gave a full statement to say that Ross had visited her that night. The circumstantial evidence, the car was the main one, you know, his actions. So it was very much what we'd gathered. We put that to sheriff.
In the first days of the new year, with the evidence against Ross mounting, a search warrant is rubber-stamped. Police can search the family home unhindered.
When the police search Carol's house on the 7th of January, it's obvious that there's been some sort of clean-up operation carried out. But because the police are incredibly thorough in these cases,
they rolled up the carpet in the living room, and that's when they found a pool of blood, like a stain, a blood stain.
You could probably go into anybody's house and find the owner's blood in there, particularly, you know, the bathroom, if you like.
This is a stain where a considerable amount of blood has seeped through from the carpet above and ended up on the back of the carpet.
Ross explained that away, saying his mum had a nosebleed, and she was it was quite common that she would have nosebleeds, and that was confirmed by the family.
A forensics team analyses what is found.
It turns out that it's Carol Taggart's blood. But this isn't the kind of stain that if you had a nosebleed, it would pop through the carpet and show.
By this time, in my mind, we were dealing with a homicide.
And, yeah. So...
For police, foul play is now a real possibility. Getting another search warrant from the sheriff, police return to the family caravan, except this time, it's a fingertip search.
Within half an hour of the search starting, I got a phone call again from the crime scene manager saying that there were blood smear marks at a low level in the caravan. So to me, that was absolutely crucial, massively significant for the investigation, but also a huge piece of evidence that there'd been a clean-up there to prevent us identifying a crime potentially, but also very, very strong suggestion that Carol had been bleeding badly.
The blood is confirmed as hers. But where exactly is Carol Taggart?
All the caravans in Pettigrew Bay are on a slope, and underneath each one is an alcove, and you can open it there's no locks on them. The man in charge of the investigation, Keith Hardy, thinks that if you were going to try and hide a body, this might be a good place to do it. And so he orders a search of all the alcoves of the caravans, and the first vacant caravan that's searched, the alcove underneath it, the police officer opens it and puts her hand in. Sadly, it becomes apparent that what she's found is a body.
Police now have to notify Lorraine and her family.
He said, we've found a body and we think it's your mum. And obviously the whole time you're thinking, I know she's dead, but to hear it in your face. And my dad's like, okay, so what's gonna happen now? He says, well, can you identify her?
Officers drive Lorraine and her father Sean to the mortuary.
So you're going to go through and she's behind a glass. And unfortunately you can only identify her by her tattoo. She had this lilac rose, because that's mine and her favourite colour, on her wrist. And obviously I had asked, why can I only identify that? It's because she's too far gone. And her face has been attacked. My dad's looking at me like, you need to say that, like, yes or no. And I couldn't get it, like it was stuck and she was there. And I said yes, and then my dad just lifted me and put me out of the room.
The case against Ross is building daily. Police need to understand his relationship with his family and his mum.
There was a really, really tight connection between Carol and Ross, to the detriment of other members of the family. And a feeling that Ross was controlling Carol, and also controlling her finances.
He was starting to be a little bit controlling of my mum, what she was doing, when she was doing it. My mum was on a lot of medication. She had a lot of health issues, kind of brought on by herself, to be honest. She dealt with migraines a lot, and it was really, really bad. So she was on pethidine for that. But I noticed that Ross had been giving her more, and I said, why are you giving her more? Because Mum wants more. But that's not what she's allowed. Lorraine, just shut up.
The relationship that he had with his mother seemed to be a combination of rows and arguments, mostly over money. Ross was described as a sponger by his mum at one point in a text message. One of the things that he claimed was held over his head was the family will, threatening to cut him out of the will.
When my mum and dad separated when I was 19, because of Ross, because of the arguments, because my mum always sided with him, my dad felt he couldn't step in. And at that point, my mum kept saying to him, no, know your place. I'm his mum, he's mine. And my dad got told that very often. And obviously that's going to break a relationship. It's like he had set it up. He got rid of my dad, my mum, and he had her right where he wanted her. Ross was always round my mum. She was paying for everything. He got everything he wanted out of her. It was odd. They would go to cinema dates, holidays together, dinner together, you name it, shopping days together.
And one of those lavish trips abroad was to America.
It was his 30th. My mum had taken him to New York. Stephen showed me the post. It was like a bragging, like, ha ha ha, I've got it all myself. And obviously I'm going to take it more personal, being the little sister. And it was, I think, watches and trainers and everything he could get. And it's so frustrating for me because is that all you see out a relationship? Whereas I wanted that relationship with my mum of an emotional relationship. For a mum to be proud of their daughter, and here's him on social media like, haha, look what I've got, we've done this together, we've done that. They pictures are the last that I saw on social media of my mum.
Police gather all the video evidence they can to reveal Ross's movements around the time of Carol's disappearance, starting at the caravan site.
There was a CCTV sighting of a male fitting Ross's description in the early hours around 4 o'clock in the morning. And I think the best way to put it would be acting suspiciously in the area, but also carrying a holdall. The question would be, what was in the holdall? You know, was that him going up to clean the caravan or whatever?
Ross Taggart's behaviour following his mother's disappearance is a combination of arrogance, breathtaking recklessness, to the point of stupidity. He started to use his mother's credit cards. He went to see the Hunger Games in the cinema and he used her card to pay for it. He was withdrawing money from her account. He was going to nightclubs. He was kind of living the high life over the Christmas period. He certainly wasn't sitting in his house waiting for the phone to ring, which is probably what most people would do.
Carol's body might also hold vital clues to help the investigation.
It's down to the forensic people to remove it, doing their best to preserve all the forensic evidence or forensic opportunities that might be on the body itself. But it was wrapped in a duvet cover and then tied up with a twine, a strung type twine.
The twine rope that's used was found in the caravan, the actual roll that is used to tie her. She was wrapped up a few times.
The duvet cover matched pillowcases recovered in the house. So we're really, really getting there now.
So all interlinked that, you know, we took her from and took her to.
With the twine and bedding used to wrap up Carol having come from her own house, then found with her body at the caravan site, there is a clear connection. police have got everything they need to arrest Ross Taggart.
We detained him for an assault which led to the death of Carol Taggart and explained to him it might well be a murder investigation. I didn't want him to abscond. I wanted him in custody. And I was confident that the result of the post-mortem would be that it was a criminal act committed on Carol.
Detectives waste no time in questioning Ross again.
He had no idea how the car got there. He couldn't explain how it was found next to an address which he had clearly visited. He continued his denial. He talked about pawning his mother's jewellery, but that she'd pawned jewellery in the past. He didn't give us anything to work with, if you like. The majority of the interview was a no-comment, what we'd call a no-comment interview, where he's entitled to, under Scots law, to make no comment, so you're innocent until proven guilty.
When Ross Taggart was arrested, it would have been a shock to the community to find out that his son had been accused of murdering his mother.
The questions in my head, like, why? Why would you want to kill Mum? Like, she's Mum. Like, why would you want to do that?
Very quickly after the arrest of Ross, the post-mortem was carried out, and the result of the post-mortem that Carol had died as a result of strangulation.
Outside of the forensic evidence, most of what the police have is circumstantial. And Ross continues to be uncooperative.
It's the individual's right. They have the right to remain silent. The solicitor would want to see the weight of evidence against their client, if you like. When a trial starts and when it goes to a jury, you can never predict to any degree of certainty what a jury is going to return as a verdict.
The family organised the funeral of Mum Carol. But Ross, even though in custody at Perth Prison, continues to cause pain.
A week before it, Ross had said he was coming to the funeral. I says, over my dead body is he coming to the funeral? It's not happening. And at this point, you're innocent until proven guilty, which is correct. And they were arguing about it over me, and I says, well, if he goes to a funeral, none of us are going. Nobody else will be there, he can go himself. And eventually I won the case and he wasn't allowed to go. And everybody got to pay their respects, and then she got cremated. There was lots of people, I remember loads of people being there, like it was quite full, which was nice. Whatever happens or happened in our relationship, she's still my mum. She's the only mum I'm going to get, and I will love her and forever. She's a pain in the bum, but she's my pain in the bum. I've got to deal with him having taken my mum. I've got a trial to go through. And it was just really overwhelming.
Almost a year after the murder, Ross Taggart finally faces a jury. The trial's at the High Court in Edinburgh. The courtroom that Ross Taggart's murder trial was held in was actually quite small, and the press seats are right behind the dock. And if it wasn't for the Perspex barrier, you could literally reach out and tap the accused on the shoulder.
So we went in, and there he was. He was wearing this white polo shirt, and I could only see the back of him. And he'd got really fat. It's like he was a stranger. It's like I didn't know him. He was odd. It was really cold feeling, it was awful.
Lorraine was one of the first people to give evidence during the trial, and she describes Ross as her mother's blue-eyed boy. One thing she says that's quite significant as well is that Carol would never have stormed out of her own house. She had arguments with Carol in the past, and it was Lorraine that had to leave. Very, very difficult for someone to give evidence against their brother in a trial where he's accused of killing their mother.
My job as prosecutor is to bring out the evidence in relation to the crime.
First, The prosecution wants to convey to the jury Ross's criminal tendencies.
The accused led a bit of an odd existence. He had short-lived periods of employment, some of which ended as a result of dishonesty or even idleness on his part. He was not a good attender at work, and there certainly were suggestions that he had stolen fairly high-value property from at least one employer.
Throughout the trial, Ross Taggart seemed disinterested, it was almost like he was watching a TV programme a lot of the time.
CCTV and the testimony of witnesses also forms part of the mounting evidence.
His attempt to sell an expensive piece of jewellery, which must have been removed from the woman's finger, almost certainly after death. His explanation for that was that he simply took it to be valued and had no intention of selling it. And that was quite contrary to the evidence of the jeweller, who very clearly remembered being offered it for sale. We know that on Christmas Eve at night he was out socialising. We know that from credit card bills and CCTV footage. He appeared not to have a care in the world and was certainly enjoying himself at his mother's expense because it was her credit card he was using. The accused chose to give evidence, and in evidence he maintained that he had nothing at all to do with his mother's death.
But despite Ross's denial in court, prosecutor Ian McSporran has a wealth of hard evidence, starting with Carol's blood found at home and in the caravan.
It was obvious that this was an important finding, and it indicated that she had not left that house alive and well, but that something producing significant bleeding had happened to her in her own home. But focusing now on the caravan itself, police discover marks in blood strongly suggestive of the body having been dragged along the floor within the caravan.
Your body only clots when you're dead. And her body was still producing blood, so she wasn't dead when he took her out the caravan and dragged her up, so she was still bleeding out. And then he's got on top of her as she's moved and blunt force strangled her to death and broke her neck, and that's what finally killed her.
That, plus many other pieces of evidence, of course, including the recovery of the poor woman's body bound in materials which could be linked by a number of means to him, meant that there was really no defence for him here.
But there are more details about the investigation that can only now come out in court.
The other piece of information that they discover that they don't make public is that in the car's sat-nav there's an address that's been entered, and it's an address in King Street. And it turns out that this is a woman that Ross Taggart arranged to meet on the 22nd of December, the day after he killed Carol. He has been in an exchange on a dating site, and she sent him her address. Ross Taggart has put this address into the sat-nav on his mum's car and driven there.
But Ross, in his statement, had told police that on the night of his mother's disappearance, she had sped off in that very car.
That evidence was huge in the trial because of he had said that he hadn't driven the car.
A witness is called, and it's a young woman, and she's quite nervous. This woman's evidence comes as a bit of a surprise to the trial.
It was observed that there was greenery at the front bumper, suggesting it had been driven off-road. And more importantly, the driver's seat had been set in a position which would suggest a tall person, over 6 foot, as was Ross Taggart, and not the small, petite person his mother was. My view as a prosecutor was that it was as close to a smoking gun as any.
Ross Taggart's response when he was being questioned He didn't give any explanations. He just said, I can't explain that. I don't know why that happened. He was asked about the sat-nav address. I don't know. Why did you do that? I don't know.
He wasn't unpleasant, he wasn't aggressive. By presenting this, I'm a nice guy, I would never have harmed my mother. He seemed to think he was doing a good job when nothing he was saying made any sense and nothing came across as being remotely credible. He said something like, I'm the last person who would lift my hands to my mother, which always struck me as being somewhat prophetic, because he was in fact the last person who lifted his hands to his mother. And in due course the jury made up their minds.
The jury went out to deliberate, and I think it was 47 minutes. Which felt like a lifetime, but it's probably, they said, one of the shortest ever deliberations they've had.
The jury returns to court.
The clerk of court asks, what is your verdict in respect of the accused Ross Taggart in charge 1, the charge of murder? And in this case, the spokesperson replied, guilty. And then they're asked, is that verdict unanimous or by a majority? And in this case, it was unanimous.
He just looked impassive. And I think at that point, Ross Taggart realised that the game was up.
He didn't react whatsoever. Didn't put his head down, didn't, like, just look straight in front, nothing.
Carol and her family are there for the sentencing.
In the courtroom, there was just that stillness because you're not allowed to talk or things.
The judge hands out a life sentence and orders Ross Taggart to serve a minimum of 18 years.
It was good that he was found guilty, because he could have walked out, he could have walked past us or not be found guilty. I'm so thankful that people that were good at their job, Mr. McSporran and stuff, and the jury seeing through his lies.
I had no doubt at all that the jury would convict this accused.
Thankfully, myself and my team, we were able to bring him to justice and show what a despicable person he was. The fact that he could beat his sister in front of his mother, and also that his mother never intervened. Carol was perhaps blinkered to Ross and couldn't see anything that he would do was anything other than proper, you know, and certainly the blue-eyed boy.
I've covered a lot of murder cases, and in many of these cases the murderer and the victim are known to each other. But for the murderer and the victim to be son and mother is very unusual, and I'd certainly never seen a case like it in my life.
For Lorraine and her family, Ross's conviction isn't the end of their turmoil.
I hadn't even thought about the house, the estate, the will. We started turning the wheels, getting everything in motion, and spoke to my lawyer and found out that he was the executor of the will.
It's a particularly cruel twist at the end of this case to find out that Ross Taggart is still pulling the strings in some regard from his prison cell.
There's a law which applies both in England and Wales and in Scotland called the Forfeiture Act from 1982, and that embodies a rule of public policy which says that a person should not benefit from their criminal activities. And it means then that in Scotland, if an individual kills somebody else, they can't benefit as a beneficiary. But there are no such equivalent laws in relation to preventing an executor from holding office where they have killed another person. So there's no statutory prevention to prevent an individual being appointed as an executor in these circumstances.
Even retrieving a few precious personal items from her mother's home has to be done under supervision by Ross's lawyers.
I didn't get a lot of time in it. Things were ruined. I've got some photographs and things. I was more disheartened that my mum's palace that she loved was destroyed, and obviously I walked in and the carpet was rolled up. It looks like a water stain, but I knew what that was, and they had broken our blinds, and obviously the police had been in and it hadn't been fixed from that point doing their job, so everything was everywhere and it just looked sad. I'm going to keep going until I get the law changed, and hopefully someone hears me. We've tried everything. It was going to cost us 50 grand to go to start a trial to try and get them removed. We couldn't afford that. I don't have that kind of money. It's so long ago. It's over 100 years ago. It needs to be changed. If my mum was alive nowadays, I think we could have mended something, but we never got that chance. He took that away. I have our grandchildren. She could have saw me being a mum. I mean, she wasn't old. She still had her full life ahead of her. But she never got that opportunity. I never got that opportunity.